It is good to have everybody back, and it is good to dive deep into this lesson today. So let's begin our lesson with the word of prayer. Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we give you thanks for your word and the guidance that it gives to us. We desperately need your word in this time and in this day. So we're grateful that we in community can read your word and study your word. We ask, Lord, that you would open our minds, that we may understand you as we study this word, and that you open our hearts, that we may grow closer and closer to you and to our brothers and sisters. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, we pray. Amen. I'm going to ask everybody if you would mute, and Linda and I are going to kind of share. We will give you an opportunity to respond and to share. But I asked Linda if she would read the scripture passage today.
I'm not sure he really asked. I think he kind of said, oh, guess what? You get to read the scripture. So the first thought I had was it must have some bad words and words that are hard to pronounce or something. He was, but no, it's good. And so we're reading Exodus 17, and it's verses 1 through 7. And you can follow in your book, but I'm reading from the Message. So the wording is going to be just a little different, but actually in this particular case, it's not too far off. So here we are, Exodus 17, 1 through 7. Directed by God, the whole company of Israel moved on in stages from the wilderness of Sin. They set camp up at Rephidim, and there wasn't a drop of water for people to drink. The people took Moses to task. Give us water to drink. But Moses said, why pester me? Why are you testing God? But the people were thirsty for water there. They complained to Moses, why did you take us from Egypt? Drag us out here with our children and animals to die of thirst. Moses cried out a prayer to God. What can I do with these people? Any minute now, they're going to kill me. God said to Moses, go on out ahead of the people, taking with you some of the elders of Israel. Take the staff you used to strike the Nile and go. I'm going to be present before you there on the rock of Horeb. You are to strike the rock. Water will gush out of it, and the people will drink. Moses did what he said, with the elders of Israel right there watching. He named the place Massah for testing place and Meribah for quarreling. Because of the quarreling of the Israelites and because of their testing of God, when they said, is God here with us or not? The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Sean has some visual aids today, but before we get to there, I really feel that the sermon today connected to our lesson because it's talking about suffering. And I don't think, even though you're sitting there going, wasn't this last week's lesson? Haven't we talked about this before? They're complaining again to Moses, and Moses goes to God, and God rolls his eyes, I'm sure, and says, okay, let me just do this. But I think it's important that we understand that the struggle is real. These people are really struggling. Yeah, they've been through all of these miracles, but this is a big deal in their lives, and they're out in the middle of the wilderness, and they're relying on this Moses, who was reluctant as a leader in the first place, and they keep complaining because they still are struggling. And when we have some backup material to read, and the author said, we have to recognize, and this is a perfect example in Exodus that God's people have a tendency to complain about what they don't have. We have a tendency to complain about what we don't have instead of focusing on what we do have. And the Hebrews were no different. You know, they were going through this struggle, this horrible, terrible period of time. And we go through a struggle right now, and we find ourselves focusing on what's wrong, what we don't have. And it's hard to be a leader during that time, because a lot of times we think, oh, if I can lead here, I can lead there. And that's not necessarily true. It doesn't always transfer. And so I think that it's important that we recognize, even though we feel like we've heard this from the Hebrews before, and actually we have, and we'll hear it again. They tend to go through this. The struggle to them, though, is still real. It is a real struggle. It's a difficult time. And these are things that make them worried about their well-being and taking care of their families and what's going to happen on the other end of this journey. So those are things keep in mind as we talk about this, because this is really a massive journey that takes so long. You know, we're impatient people. That's what we humans are. We want to have it done. And some of us may be more patient than others, but relative to other creatures in the world, we are pretty impatient as a group. And they had a long road ahead of them that they really maybe didn't even realize just how long it was going to be. And they're struggling at this kind of early phase in the journey. They're already having a difficult time. And so they go to Moses and complain about the water. And it's sort of, you know, God, if you love me, you need to give me what I want.
I think it's interesting to think about the major shift that was taking place for these people, and as a community and as a system. And so I think what we see, kind of building on your point, Linda, is that when we go through a major transition, and this is a major transition, it's a good transition, but it's a major transition, that systems, and when I mean systems, I mean people, that organizations and systems, or whatever you want to call it, there's going to be tension, and there's going to be struggle, and there's going to be complaining. That's just going to happen. And, you know, I was thinking about this. And so if you kind of read or tune in to kind of leadership guru people, you know, what they'll tell you is communicate, communicate, communicate. These shifts are going to take place. If you're bringing change, kind of communicate all of that. And even when you do that, even when you try to communicate, there's still going to be some complaining. Well, I guess God isn't following that. I'm not so sure. I mean, maybe it's there, but God is just kind of saying, we're going to go, and I'm not communicating where you're going. You're just going to have to trust the process. You're going to have to trust me. And I think that might be an interesting thing to ponder and think about when we think of churches and we think about religious groups, when we think about anybody that is going through a change or shift, that, yeah, of course, communication helps, but sometimes people are just going to be negative because they are experiencing things they've never experienced before. And so it's kind of natural. And I wonder if that's part of the reason that it kind of, if you read this, that God's kind of patient with them. You know, Moses is not patient with them, but right now God is kind of, okay, you need water, we're going to provide you water. You need food? Yeah, you do need food. I'm going to provide you food. And there's a bit of patience. Now, I think God will get them some, and maybe that's Moses too. But these shifts take place, and I think that's a lesson for us as a big body to think about. As a church, here we are in the midst of a great transition. It may just be temporary, but we're having Bible study on Zoom. We're having worship online. Um, Actually, you guys don't really complain a whole lot, so I am thankful for that. But maybe it's because we are separated and I just don't hear the complaints. But I think that's something to hold on to, is that through the process of transition, there's just going to be negativity that comes. And sometimes we just got to keep pushing through the negativity and maybe even allow some grace for it. People are going through something that's very, very different. They're going to complain about it.
I think we see that today when we hear the stories in the paper, and when earlier in the summer, when they, some of the churches would start to have their services again, they say, no, we're just going to do this. And I think that came from a lot of different places, but I think partly it came from, we don't know how to not do this. That's what we do. So how can you say don't do it? It was like it was making the connection to worship to a very finite activity in a certain way, in a certain pattern, in a certain place, and it was connecting it to all of those things that were familiar, because we were dealing with so much unfamiliarity at the time. And so I don't know that all of them came from a place of resistance, but a place of, we don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
And we are fortunate, and I keep trying to do this while I was reading, trying to look for the positive and stuff, but we're really fortunate in this area because so many of us are able to do Zoom and get on the internet and do those things. But some of these locations that seemed resistant, and their congregation isn't in a position to do that. So they were looking, instead of, we either do what we've done always, or we leave people out. And I think that if we look back at the Hebrews, they want to follow, they want to do, they want to do what God said, they want to follow Moses, but at the same time, part of them's going, but we're kind of, sorry, but we are used to eating and drinking. We're used to feeling safe, feeling secure, and they're not feeling that. And, and I don't think, Moses was good about following what God said, but Moses kind of said from the beginning, I'm not the right person for the job. So he probably struggled at first getting used to how to communicate with these people about what was going on, because he had limited information. I deal with that all the time, but if you've done that and somebody asks you a question and you don't really have the answer, but they need an answer, that's hard. That's hard to say, I'm not going to be able to give you an answer at all, because that's just going to leave them hanging out there. And the Hebrews were probably, I got a kid who's thirsty, just like they had when they were hungry. You need to give me a concrete answer. And so I think that communication is that kind of thing. You need to be saying, we're in this together. We're going to, you're not the only one who's like this, who's struggling, who doesn't have water. We'll find a way. We'll ask God to help us find a way. And so by avoiding that, sometimes it turns into more of a problem than it was initially.
Yeah, and I think you're right about the way we kind of look at this pandemic and this experience, and that we really didn't know. And there was this, from preachers, we kind of like the routine too, and we kind of don't know what to do. And really, when you think about church in the midst of the pandemic, we just never knew that it was going to be this long, and we kept trying to do the best we can and make decisions the best that we could assuming that we were going to be coming back. I mean, that's why we have 3 gallons of hand sanitizer from the distillery that smells like alcohol from a distillery, because we said, hey, we got to make sure we have enough.
Right.
And that's why there is this, we just don't know how to kind of move forward, and so we long to go back. And there's a learning process in this. That's why we hear so much of the grumbling from schools and teachers and parents. And it is hard. This is pretty hard for students and teachers and parents. Um, but it's safe. You know, we're trying to be safe, and um, we're gonna grumble with the uncertainty, and and maybe we just need to allow some grace for that. I'm gonna kind of share my screen here. We're gonna try something um, here, and there's the scripture passage. But I want to show you a map, and we'll kind of hold this up here. We'll put this up here, but you can get a sense of where they are going, right? And how deep they are getting um, into the wilderness. Can you see my arrow there?
Mm-hmm.
You guys see the map and you see the arrow? Yeah, shake your head. Wonderful. And so as they get into this point, they're getting fairly deep into the wilderness, and they're kind of getting further away from their sources of water. And you know, danger is going to also come in this area too. But as we think about, um, so just for reference, this way is the promised land. Here, you're supposed to go this way, right? And they're going the roundabout way. God is bringing them along each step, right? If you were going to go a quick way here, each step seems to be further away from where God promises. And we sense that almost in this pandemic, especially if we think about church, as we kind of keep getting further away from doing what we used to do. So now we've come to realize pretty much that worship is going to be less than 10 people in the service in the pews, and 90% of our folks are going to be watching online. Those that are watching online can consistently depend on something happening with the live stream. It may just cut off right in the middle of the sermon, or you might miss 30 seconds of the sermon or something. But that's the reality. We're not getting anywhere closer to what we used to have. We seem to, in some ways, keep getting further from it, because, you know, we thought, well, maybe we'll be back by the summer or the fall or whatnot, and here we are.
I think the map points out too, you know, we can see this convoluted approach, but they didn't really know where they were going. So, you know, it's weighing that disappointment against that anticipation each time. If you don't really know what the end point is, each time you have a milestone, you get to some place. Maybe you get to a place that's not so bad. It has a little water. It seems comfortable, and you think this might be it. No, we're going to keep moving. And so, you know, you have that positive, and then it's kind of another wall and in your face type of thing. And so we can see that they are certainly meandering about, and they don't really know where they're meandering about to get to. And so that desperation, that insecurity, you know, if you're not careful, those things are when people start to get really agitated, when there's a lot of conflict, maybe even violence. So I think when I see them coming to Moses, if you think about what we would do today, before we go to that person, who would be leading us, chances are we've had a few interactions with some others. So I can imagine that this was kind of a volatile group of people at this point, that they probably had some conflicts going on amongst them. They probably had a group that felt they should do this and a different group that felt, everybody has the answer, but nobody really knows those answers. And so when they finally are desperate enough that they don't feel like the answers are quickly coming, that's when they go to Moses. So that by the time they come to poor Moses, they're worked up pretty good. So, it would be not so much that they were going through this process together, but that he's sort of randomly leading them, and then they come and they challenge the process every time. And I can imagine what that would be like if a church was trying to do that. If every time Sean said, okay, well, let's try, Zoom for Bible study, and everybody was like lambasting, I don't think we should use Zoom for Bible study. And we're fortunate because in our congregation, people are kind of like, okay, sure, let's give it a try. And, but not all places are like that, because it's one more different thing. I mean, it's one more thing that's not normal like we remember it being. And what we don't know is that all these things we're learning and all these techniques we're picking up, where's it going to get us to? We feel we'll be back at the church, but we don't really know when and how we're going to get there. And so what good are all these new things? But when we get there, they may be wonderful. There may be things we have learned and mastered and finally been able to put in place that really help us do what God needs us to do in our community. And so, but we don't know that yet. So it's that frustration that kind of builds on itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And probably some stuff is going to stick. I'm just putting the scripture there. I doubt we'll go back to being at the church on Wednesday nights, to be honest with you. I don't know, that might change, but unless there's food, whenever we can do food and figure food out, we might go back. But probably that's going to be something that we stick with, is the Wednesday night prayer meeting on Zoom, because it's convenient for our folks that are working and traveling, and there's a good connection there. So I want to point out something that I think is really important for all of us to hear in this passage, is that we know there's a lot of negativity, and we can understand the negativity. Transition is taking place. There's uncertainty. They're in a totally different place. They don't know where they're going. They seem to get further and further away from water or from where they're supposed to be going. And so Moses has caught all of this, and he's struggling with the complaining and the quarreling. And so Moses cries out to the Lord, what should I do with these people? They want to stone me. And what does God say? And how does God instruct Moses? He says, go on ahead of the people. He says, I want you to get away from the people. I want you to pull yourself out of what you are experiencing and what you're feeling. Take a step away from the negativity. Take a break from the complaining. Get off Facebook. Get off Twitter, Moses. There's just too many negative voices there, and I want you to get away from that. I want you to get away from that so you can hear me and you can see me. So go ahead of the people. Get out in front of the people. Get away from them. Take some of your elders with you, because you're going to need that support. Get them away from the people too. Some of that negativity can stop. And then I want you to take the tools that I have given you, the tool that I gave you, that you struck the Nile, that has already worked before, and I want you to stand before this rock, and I am going to give you what you need. I think that's an important piece. Moses, step away from the negativity. Get out ahead of it, and let's do something productive here. And what God does is God doesn't try to say, you're right, Moses, or, well, Moses, actually, they're right. he doesn't engage into the debate. He says, let's look at a different solution. And that solution is obviously going to come from God, and it's going to come from a random place. I want you to strike this rock, and I'm going to make water come out of the rock, right? So if we think about, man, my goodness, are we divided right now, right? And we have two camps, don't we? We have two camps on how we should handle uh, and think and understand. And if you can be consumed by the bickering and debating and arguing, it can turn you um, sour and rotten. You kind of pick that up, right? You know, Moses is being almost influenced by the crowd more than he's influenced by God. Moses is picking up the feelings of the crowd and not the strength of God. So God says, let's get away. Come on,
Yeah.
let's step out of this.
And I think he's not only supporting Moses by having him take some of the leaders. I think he is reassuring some of the leaders.
Yeah.
Look, I'm here. I'm leading this thing. It's not just Moses on his own. You know, he said he would be at the rock when they got there. So, you know, that they would understand that they, as leaders, needed to support Moses and try to take care of the people and try to keep people calm and moving in a positive direction. And so it makes Moses have a team, so to speak, and you can just be more productive when you have that kind of support. There's just a lot that can be accomplished, and there were a lot of people for them to deal with and a lot of people to be provided for, and there would be conflicts just personality wise. So God needed a strong team, and this gave him an opportunity to reinforce the team by having them all there at the rock to see what was done with the tools he had given, and to be used for the benefit of the whole group of people, not just Moses. It's not coming out on top of this situation, but you all are leading a group of people, and this is what I'm going to do for you, and I want you to observe that I'm involved in this. And so it reinforces that leadership, which is so important. And sometimes when you're not the leader, you don't think about that. You don't think about the fact that your leader is potentially struggling with the decisions or with what needs to be done on a day in and day out basis, or making things happen the way they need to. And you know, and we still today, people, you know, in the work that I do in our company, we have had people working the entire time, and yet there are still people that are complaining about, you know, other aspects, and you want to go to them and go, you know, have you thought about the people that don't have jobs? Have you thought about the people that don't have, you know, and you've had this opportunity? It's almost like, you know, it goes back to like the Hebrews, but what have you done for me lately? You know, yeah, but it's not comfortable. It's not normal. They're having to work differently, and so they're taking that uncomfortable level and basically turning it into a complaint about working when they should be grateful that they're working. And so the leadership gets bombarded. So even when things are going sort of well, they're getting all the negativity. I'm sure even on a good day, Moses, you know, heard all the griping and the complaining, because there's always somebody griping and complaining. So.
Yeah, and it is absolutely. And so there's a tension here that we've created a kind of with the sermon today and with this lesson, in that there is an appropriate place to be honest with God about how you feel. And there's also a sense that too much negativity, if you're just wallowing in that, which is easy to do, that is not productive or helpful. And Linda, I like that image of he's given them a team. He is bringing the elders, kind of means, Moses, you don't have to hold this all on your own. They're going to see it too, and then they're going to be there to back you up, so that when you go to the rest of the people, it's not going to be just your word, it's going to be theirs too. And I think that's a gift that God certainly gave Moses in that time. I want to share one more piece with you, and this is from a devotion that this week, we'll kind of pause right there, but this week, this devotion, pieces of this devotion, and I just have a piece that I'm going to share with you, was referenced 3 different times for me in 3 different groups. And when one piece of writing is brought up by 3 different people, you kind of need to pay attention to that in 1 week. And so I'm going to share this with you because I think it speaks to this. I think it speaks to our day. And this is kind of a statement by Richard Rohr, who is a priest, and he runs an organization that deals with contemplative prayer and action. And this is part of what he says in his devotion. He says, God cannot abide with us in a place of fear. God cannot abide with us in a place of ill will or hatred. God cannot abide with us inside a nonstop volley of claim and counterclaim. God cannot abide with us in an endless flow of online prudentry and analysis. God cannot speak inside of so much angry noise and conscientious deceit. God cannot be found when all sides are so far from the falconer. God cannot be born except in the womb of love. So offer God that womb. And the falconer here is in reference to a poem, and what it just means is that when the falcon is not taking commands from his master, then he gets disoriented and lost. And if we're not careful, there is so much noise right now in our country. There are so many opinions. There's so much anger. There's so much just out there that if we don't step out from it, if we don't step away from it, we're not going to hear God's voice. And God is not going to be able to abide with us. There's going to be a hard way for God to connect with us. And I think that what Richard Rohr is saying is if you just spend all of your time online and on 24-hour news, God is going to have a hard time reaching you in that. And that we need to step away from it. And he had said, Richard Rohr says, I recommend that for Christians that they just limit their online, their 24-hour news to maybe 1 hour a day. You know, you got to have it, and you're going to go to it, but just limit that to 1 hour a day, and then step away from it, get away from it, and allow yourself to hear the word of God, the presence of God. And I think that's an important word for us today.
I think it's really important because when we hear that news and we are constantly bombarded by it, it's like that voice. That's the voice that becomes that little voice in our brain. We hear those voices and those shouts and that anger over and over. Doesn't mean that we ignore what made those voices raise up.
Sure.
It just means that we have to realize what it does to us and how much of our thought process and our actions it takes up, how much of our daily thought is involved in that. And we may have to we may get to the point where they, like the Hebrews, where they were, if you love me, you need to do this. We need to say, if we love God, we need to do this. We need to step out from all of that and start letting him speak to us and tell us what we can be doing, what we should be doing. May not involve saving the world, just in case anybody's got, a high goal, but it may be that it's how we deal with the people on any given day. It's maybe, not letting things get us to the point where we're short-tempered with people, or we're, having those difficulties, and get on with living life as best we can.
Yeah.
As opposed, like you said, as opposed to wallowing in our complaints.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point, is that it doesn't mean we don't pay attention to who or what or why. These are the Israelites who are God's people, and they need water. Those two things are true. And so they are God's people that God loves, and they need water. But the constant negativity just can swallow you up, and maybe was starting to swallow Moses up. And God says, let's get out. Let's get away, and we're going to come up with a solution for this. Yeah, some of the noise that we're hearing today comes from things that are legitimate and that are needed. And some of the tensions that we are feeling are real. And everybody's feelings are real because they're their feelings. But sometimes when we're in a setting where we're just yelling and arguing with each other, we're not expressing who we truly are, and we're not getting to any real solutions. And sometimes we have to just step away. All right, I'm going to pull us all back together here. And Linda, do you have a final thought that you wanted to get in or share?
I think that the last thing that I was struck by in some of the readings that we had was the author said that sometimes the meaning behind the action is actually more important than the action. So sometimes I think we limit what we're willing to do for God and how far we're willing to follow him, because it doesn't seem big enough, grandiose enough, doesn't seem like it's going to solve, like I said, the problems of the world. But that action itself may not be what we can do, what limited things we can do. That may not be really what God's using. What he is using is that intent behind it, and that somebody observes it, and that somebody else benefits from it, and they turn around and they forward that activity, and that they have a more positive feeling because of something you did, whether it even went the way you wanted it to go. And so I think that Moses was struggling, and his struggle was real, just like the struggle of the Hebrews was real. But his faith is what was getting him through it. And his faith was what was getting them through that wilderness. And we have to be faithful. And so we have to make sure that we understand why we do things, why we say things, and why others may be doing and saying things. We have to look at those things and help us focus on God and what he wants us to do.
Yep, I agree. Margie, I hear you, and I'm trying to make it happen. Did that happen? Yeah, and I can try to send that or email that, email it to you. In fact, I have a copy of the whole devotion, and I'll see if I can't email that to everyone. You can sign up for that. Okay, guys, I did not prepare the questions this week. I didn't put them out. So we're just going to kind of open it up. And if you have questions yourself, or if you have points to this lesson that spoke to you or that you would like to share, we're going to give you an opportunity to respond now. So maybe you want to comment on something that Linda and I talked about, or something else that you read in the scripture or in the lesson. And so this is your chance to speak.
And you have to unmute when you do it.
Well, this is Barbara. And I guess what I think is really interesting is when I read the lesson this week, I kind of thought, well, that was from forever and ever ago. But after listening to the lesson this morning, I'm thinking, oh gosh, this is where we are now. And so I appreciate what Sean just gave us from this Richard Rohr. Yeah, and I'll make note of that. But thank you. Thank you.
When I was reading this passage, and God tells Moses, take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile and go. I was thinking, why would God bring up Nile now? More recently, that staff was used to part the Red Sea. But then I realized Nile was when God told the Egyptians or showed the Egyptians he was in control of their source of drinking water. When Moses stuck the rod on the Nile, their drinking water became blood. So I thought that was what God was trying to remind them even before he did the miracle, that he was the source of drinking water. He can make Nile blood. He can also bring water from dry rock. Even though the Israelites didn't see a drop of drinking water in the wilderness, he was still in control. I think that's why the Lord brought up the Nile here.
Great point. I agree.
Similar to Divya, I had made a note that water seemed to be a theme. And I was wondering if that's because, well, this is what I thought, we think of water as being cleansing. And as they're going through all these different stages of, encounters with water, maybe somehow that was a cleansing feature as they learn their lessons.
I had a question as from last week too. In my mind, lamenting and complaining are two different things. Do you see it as the same?
I think it's a fine line of difference. I think that when we read about the lamenting, they're talking about, why have you, they're sad that they feel like God's deserted them. They're having these things. Complaining is a little bit more along the line of, what have you done for me lately? I'm inconvenienced now. And I think lamenting is a little bit more looking back and realizing this is my predicament and I'm sad about it, and what happened and why is it happening, and trying to understand. Whereas I think complaining, you're just complaining. I mean, most of my experience, when somebody's complaining, they're not really trying to understand what happened. They just want to be heard. And they're not really looking at it from a standpoint of, oh gosh, maybe this caused this and that. No, they just want to know. They just want to complain. I'm not happy with the current situation. Whereas lamenting, I think, is looking back and going, as in the verses, and you've left us, and this is what's happening, and and I'm trying to understand it, and it's almost more of a help me figure this out and what's going on type of thing. But it's a fine line, because when we read those, when Sean reads the verses and then we hear them in church with the lamenting, they're also not happy with the situation. But
I think that maybe I definitely think there is a difference between complaining and lamenting. I think that we see that here. But I think that too often as Christians, we can think that lamenting is complaining, and we can see lament as complaint. And oftentimes what we will hear people saying is, let's just be positive. God's going to take care of this. Let's just say good things about God. Don't dare say anything troubling. And I think that's, people may see lament as complaint, but certainly lament is just, it is just bearing our true feelings when things are terrible and not going right. And so I think those are the important distinctions. And so we, when I talk about the tension we've created, is that we need to understand when we are right to lament and when it becomes complaining, I guess. I think so we have to constantly think about that, because you can lament too long, but and you can also not lament enough and be true to what's really going on. So that's the tension that I see.
Isn't lamenting to giving it to God, and when you're complaining, you're just trying to solve the issue on your own will and power, not recognizing what the Lord can do and will do?
That's what I kind of think, but.
Well, yeah, I think part of the complaining is a misunderstanding of leadership, and that they were blaming Moses for this, right? And so their blame was that Moses, why did you lead us out? Moses said, wait a minute, so I do think there is part of that. I do think that lament is bringing it to God. You can't not believe in God and lament. I mean, because you're bringing your complaint, or you're bringing that to God, right? So you're addressing that there is a God to bring your troubles to. So
I think of the complaining as being like having a pity party. And sometimes people think that, sometimes that's what makes people feel good, to feel like they're a victim. I see the lamenting being sort of like the Psalms, where you're just honest with God and you're talking to Him and you're growing as you listen to yourself, as you listen to God, so that you can kind of work your way out of the complaining. Yeah, we all have such short memories. It's one of our greatest human faults. We forget, sometimes within hours, the good things, what God has done for us. So we have to work on that. One of the things that was in the lesson that was really interesting to me, it was on page 32 about the second part of the scripture. God responds to Moses' plea. He doesn't give him advice about leadership. Instead, God commands Moses to obey God so God can remind the people who God is. I think that's important for us to remember, that when we're doing the right thing, that helps reveal God to other people. And sometimes maybe that's part of the solution, is just for us to focus on revealing God to other people in the way that we handle the situation. Allowing God to do His thing. Because Moses did us some complaining too.
But what I was going to say, I like that definition of the difference between the lament and the complaint. When a person's complaining, they're rarely taking ownership of being part of the problem. Rarely, yeah. Right? They're just complaining. Yeah. Mm-hmm. When a person's lamenting, they can be saying, I am angry about this. Mm-hmm. I'm angry that I'm angry. but I am angry. And it is that honesty of how you're feeling, and I'm not sure what caused it, or I know this is what caused it, or whatever. And it's dealing with those emotions, trying to deal with them. And it's almost like talking them through with yourself. You know, you have somebody else and you can talk back and forth and you kind of bring yourself calm. But when you're lamenting, you can kind of say, I don't understand this. I don't like this. I'm unhappy about this. And the more you talk about it, the more you understand a little bit of where those feelings are coming from inside of you, and what's generating them. And you're just being honest, reflecting how you feel about things. And when you're complaining, you're usually just complaining. I mean, you
Yeah.
really, you're pretty much just saying it's got to be somebody's fault. You're not saying it's my fault. I didn't say that. It's got to be somebody's fault, or somebody made this happen, and you're just complaining about it. And that's a big difference between saying, I'm so angry, and maybe I know why, or maybe I don't, and I don't like being angry, and what do I do? And, this doesn't seem fair. And it's putting all the questions out there and kind of getting through that process, talking to yourself, talking with others, and talking with God, so that you can express it.
And it may appear like complaining to people that don't understand the conversation.
Absolutely.
Because, what we see with Job is that he's in a sense taking God to task. He doesn't think that what's happened is right. And we kind of see a little bit of that in Lamentations today. And I didn't really get to there's only so much you can do in sermons. But I think the mood of chapter 5 is that, you know what, this is what's happened to us goes against what you like, God. The orphans aren't going to be taken care of. The widows are being abused, these kind of things. And so I think, there's a sense of calling, some of lament is calling God out, and saying, I don't get it, and that might look like complaining, but it takes a deeper level of understanding, I think, the what's going on in someone. So I think Job could look like a complainer. In fact, that's what his friends thought. Come on, Job, get with the program. You must have done something wrong. You deserve this. This is how it works. You're complaining when he wasn't. So I appreciate, Linda, you bringing that up, because it was helpful to tease this out a little bit and work with that. I think that's good. So one last great thought does anybody have? I'm asking for one last before we dismiss.
I particularly love the point you made in the sermon today when you said, oftentimes we lament and you think God is silent or isn't working on our behalf. But at the same time, God is sorrowful too, and it must trouble his heart so to see the world in the condition that it's in today. And I never really focused in on that part of it. And I thank you for bringing that out in your sermon today. I appreciate that.
Well,
It was
Ellie
so
Wiesel
powerful.
helped me get there. Ellie Wiesel, through his long process of dealing with it, lifelong process of dealing with it. All right, let's close with the Lord's Prayer, and we're going to do what we've been doing, for a lot of us have been doing for a while. Everybody mute and try your best to follow me, just because I tend to say this not in our traditional rhythmic fashion. So try to follow me. Ready? Deep breath in. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. Peace, my friends. I hope you have a great and wonderful week. And I look forward to seeing you next week when I believe we jump into Isaiah. We're going to leave Exodus